Imagine if you were the great teacher and you thought you were making your student better. But the truth is the opposite. One or two of your students are planning for your death. You spend your days dedicated to their future, believing that a tough lesson today will build a better adult tomorrow. But while you're grading their assignments, they're grading your life, and they've decided you failed.
To respect the privacy of the individuals involved in this case, the likenesses of the characters shown in this video have been modified. While the names and events are based on true documented accounts, the visuals serve as a dramatic representation of the story. This is 3 AM Stories. Stay with us.
On November 3, 2021, Paul Graber pulled into his driveway in Fairfield, Iowa, after being out of town for a few days. It was midnight, and he expected to find his wife, Nohema, asleep in their bed. But when he walked inside, the house was silent. Nohema, a beloved 66-year-old teacher and mother of 3, was nowhere to be found. By the next morning, the entire town was out in the woods of Chautauqua Park, scouring the brush. What they eventually found, hidden under a rusting wheelbarrow and railroad ties, wasn't just a tragedy. It was a scene so brutal it left veterinary investigators speechless. But the most terrifying part wasn't the crime itself. It was the fact that just hours before she was found, the killers were sitting in a classroom acting like nothing had happened. And the reason they did it? It's something so petty, so small, that it will make your skin crawl. Nohema Graber was the kind of person every small town needs. She was a pillar of the Latino community, a devout church member, and for 9 years she taught Spanish at Fairfield High School. She was known for being warm and compassionate, but in the classroom she had a reputation. She was a tough grader. She didn't believe in participation trophies. You had to earn your grade. Nohema had one ritual she never broke. Every single day after school, she would head to Chautauqua Park for a walk. She followed the same trail, a quiet path that cut through a heavily woodsy, isolated area of the park. It was her place of peace. But on November 2, someone else was in those woods, and they weren't there for the scenery. Enter 16-year-old Willard Chaden Miller, known as Chaden. To the outside world, he was a normal high school junior. But Chaden was harboring a secret obsession. He wanted to get into a study abroad program in Spain, a dream he believed was the key to his entire future. There was just one obstacle: Nohema Graber's Spanish class. Chaden was flunking. He was convinced that Nohema wasn't just grading him. He thought she was personally out to ruin his life. He argued with her. He even brought his mother to the school to pressure Nohema into changing his grade. But Nohema held firm. She told him the truth. His work didn't meet the standard. To Chaden, this wasn't a lesson in accountability. It was a declaration of war. He turned to his friend Jeremy Goodale and asked a question that should have been a joke, but wasn't. "I really hate this Spanish teacher. Want to help me kill her?" Jeremy's response? "All right." For the next 2 weeks, these two teenagers functioned like calculated predators. They began stalking Nohema, watching her leave the school and following her to Chautauqua Park to learn her exact timing. Chaden began Googling things that would later haunt the courtroom, like, do students receive credit for a class if the professor dies? They even put together a prep list. They gathered gloves, a hammer, trash bags, and wet wipes. On the morning of November 2, they went to school, attended their classes, and even sat through the very Spanish class Chaden was failing. When the final bell rang, they didn't go home to do homework. They went to the park and waited in the shadows of the woodsy trail. When Nohema appeared on the path, she actually saw them. She recognized them as her students. They even exchanged greetings. She had no way of knowing that as she walked past, the trap was closing. Jeremy ran ahead to get in front of her, pulling on a ski mask to distract her. While Nohema was focused on the masked figure approaching her from the front, Chaden crept up behind her with a baseball bat. He struck her in the back of the head and then continued the assault after she fell. According to the investigation, they both took turns with the bat to make sure she was dead. They dragged her body into the brush, covered her with a wheelbarrow, and, in an act of pure coldness, stole the money from her wallet and her van. They ditched the van on the edge of town and then went back to Jeremy's house to get drunk. The next day at school, the community was in a panic, but Chaden and Jeremy were flexing. Chaden told friends he had caught a body with a bat. Jeremy was even bolder. He began sending Snapchats to his friends. One featured a bottle of bleach with the caption, "Time to hide a body." Another was a POV joke. POV, "You're my Spanish teacher, and this is the last thing you see." Their friends, horrified, went to the police. Both boys were arrested and charged as adults. Willard Chaden Miller was sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility after 35 years. Jeremy Goodale received life with parole after 25 years. But the tragedy had one final heartbreaking chapter. Nohema's husband, Paul Graber, was diagnosed with cancer shortly after the murder. His family testified that he died prematurely because Nohema, his primary caretaker, wasn't there to make him seek medical help for his symptoms. Paul was buried just one day before Chaden Miller was sentenced for his wife's murder. An entire family was destroyed, and a dedicated teacher's life was ended, all over a failing grade in a Spanish class.